All right, everybody, we're ready. How's it going? Running a little behind today. Sorry about that, everybody.
Man, are you looking good?
Stop it. Let's just do the show.
I love a man in a tie.
Still wearing my jacket. I got to take that off. All right.
Oh, you look great.
Oh, stop it.
Keep it on.
I feel like a news reporter. Today's news.
Dr. Dennis from Alton.
Yeah, Jeff Biswaden. Yeah, I had an interview today, Jeff. I'm not going anywhere, though, all right? So don't start that on the live stream, all right? Need part-time work. Need a little more money. All right, your Ben Joravsky.
Money.
Get your song of the day ready, Ben. Your Ben Joravsky show for Tuesday, January 20th. That's going to be a long day today. All right, your Ben Joravsky show for Tuesday, January 20th is just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. Unions like the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150 sponsor this program, as well as our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Ben Joravsky, hit us with that song of the day.
Love is in the air. Yeah, baby, love is in the air. I'm feeling it, all right?
He's feeling it, guys. The Ben Joravsky show starts now. It is Tuesday, January 20th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, our Chicago Reader colleague Maya Dukmasova will join us, and it's the long-awaited return of President of the Chicago Principals Association, our good friend Troy LaRaviere. And now your host, the long-awaited return, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Hand-Holding Tuesday. That's what we're calling it. And here's why. Great week. You have a good weekend, D?
Yes, 3 days ago. It was
had
great.
a great weekend, man. I saw Marriage Story. Got one word about Marriage Story. All right, we got to prepare.
What is it called?
Marriage Story.
Oh, Marriage Story.
Yeah, what did you think I said?
Mayor Story? I don't know what you said.
Marriage Story. Now, we're having a show on January 20, what day was it? 29th. We're bringing all the smartest brains in the world about movies into the studio to talk about the great
So
movies.
I won't be talking.
You'll be here. Dennis, you've seen two of the big movies. No, one. You've seen Joker, that right?
Yeah, and Jojo Rabbit.
Oh, Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, Jojo was a man. Yeah, I like Jojo Rabbit a lot. Anyway, so to prepare for that, I'm still watching movies. To prepare for that discussion, had to watch Marriage Story. Got one word about Marriage Story. Overrated.
Oh.
All right. And then I watched Judy, which is a movie about Judy Garland. And I watched that because Renee Zellweger is up for Best Actress. And I got to tell you, folks, I hate to admit this, I was crying like a baby at that movie. I love that movie.
Ben?
Yeah, no, man. Judy Garland, I love Judy. I'm going to just say it, but put it out there. I love Judy Garland. Maya Dukmasova in the studio, she loves Judy Garland, too. She's nodding her head. I'm not sure if Maya's ever seen a Judy Garland movie. Anyway, so then I woke up, and she's like, I have seen one. I woke up and discovered it was Martin Luther King Day, which is the one day of the year where people in the city of Chicago hold hands and say nice things about each other before they go back to fighting each other, gouging each other's eyes out, which is what and that's not even a full day that they do it, D. I think it's like for an hour at a breakfast that where all the movers and shakers of Chicago are invited. Were you invited to that breakfast, D?
No.
I don't think so.
Were you?
No, I've never been invited to the Martin Luther King Day. Never, ever. Okay, I go if invited, but actually it's really early in the morning. I've issues getting up. So, they always forget, of course, that when Martin Luther King was alive and in full in power and glory, he came to Chicago to bring his movement for open housing and a more equitable distribution of money and end slums and spend money wisely, investing in people and neighborhoods that need it the most, as opposed to throwing it down the military industrial complex. When he was alive and strong and speaking for himself, Chicagoans showed how much love they have for Martin Luther King by hitting him in the head with a rock. All right? Isn't that funny? They love him now that he's not around, but they didn't like him very much when he was around and speaking from his heart. Anyway, so there was great examples in the newspaper today of people feeling that 1 hour of love that they feel one day a week, 1 hour of love, 1 hour of love, 1 day a year. There was a picture of Jesse Jackson and Richard Durbin, Senator Durbin, at the Martin Luther King breakfast that you were not invited to, D.
Nor you.
Nor was I. There's also a story, interesting story, a pro-gun rally of thousands in Virginia. And these are people that you would not normally associate with loving Martin Luther King. But I guess they were feeling the love. It's usually a bunch of white guys with guns saying how we need less laws restricting gun use because, why? Because guns, it's hard to get a gun. And I really don't understand the argument that they make. It seems pretty easy to get a gun. There certainly are a lot of guns in our society. Anyway, to show that they're not just all white guys, there was one black man at least one black man at the rally, and this is what he had to say. I'm getting this from the Sun-Times. I love this. This is like the Super Bowl for the Second Amendment right here, said P.J. Hudson, a truck driver from Richmond who carried an AR-15 rifle just outside of Capitol Square. He was one of the few African-American rally-goers in a crowd that was overwhelmingly white and male and was frequently stopped and asked to pose for pictures wearing his, quote, "Black Guns Matter" sweatshirt. So black guns matter, but black lives don't matter. I wonder if there was anybody at the pro-gun rally wearing a shirt that said Black Lives Matter. But, it was Martin Luther King Day, so even at the pro-gun rally, they were holding hands. And finally, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren marched together, arm in arm, at the Martin Luther King March in South Carolina. And there's a photo in the paper of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren shaking hands. So now she's taking his hand. All right. Last week we talked a lot about how she didn't want. Bernie put that big Bernie paw out there to shake hands with Elizabeth Warren after the debate. And Elizabeth Warren said, "No, you lied about me." And then Bernie said, "Oh, you lied about me." That's my Bernie.
It's getting better.
You lied about me. We had LC in the studio last week.
Sounds a little like Scooby-Doo, but we're getting there.
Larry Cohen, who's in the studio, that guy loves Bernie more than anybody I've ever met. He sounds like Bernie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Larry Cohen, and I approve of this ad. Anyway, so Bernie, and they're shaking hands now. Now I'm going to say something right here. I'm going to get all my Bernie bros mad at me. I've been warned by people, don't do it, Ben. You're going to get the Bernie bros mad at you. But you know what? I don't hate on Elizabeth Warren like Bernie bros do. Okay, D? I'm just putting that out there.
I'm so mad at you right now.
Bernie bros, oh, God damn, I've had enough of this guy. Listen, man, I'm going to throw this out to our mystery guest. We have a mystery guest in the studio. That's probably the person, if you're watching the live stream, wondering, who's the mystery guest? She's going to get this question. Here's the deal. My Bernie bro listeners are always telling me the reason they love Bernie so much is that Bernie has been saying the same thing for, 50 years. He hasn't deviated. He has a sense of what the direction America should go in, the laws he would pass and support if he were president, the kind of movement he would lead. He hasn't changed his tune. He doesn't bend with the breeze. He's fixed. And he has fixed principles that have governed him his entire political career, and I can appreciate that. And that's why Bernie's currently number one on my list of 5. Okay, I got my top 5, and in the Democratic nomination, the primary for the nomination. Anyway, on the other hand, they say, well, Elizabeth Warren, as of 1996, was a Republican. People, I don't know if you know that, D. Elizabeth Warren was a Republican, and she did not officially become a Democrat until 1996. Now, I could quickly point out that Bernie Sanders is not even officially a Democrat. He's a Democratic Socialist, okay? Just throwing that out there, Bernie bros, to make you feel a little happier. But I'm just throwing that out there, giving Elizabeth Warren a hard time because she didn't officially become a Democrat until 1996. So I look at it this way. Yes, it's true that Elizabeth Warren did not emerge into adulthood articulating the same views she's articulating now. But I can make an argument or a case for evolving toward a position, like looking at the world and seeing everything that exists and realizing that maybe the worldview you had as a child and as a teenager and as a young mother and a law school professor was wrong. And that the world's different than you saw, and you have the flexibility, the nimbleness, the open-mindedness to change your position, and that's and adopt a position that's more in line with what I believe in, progressive politics. So I'm going to make the argument that maybe it's just as heartfelt in Elizabeth Warren as it is for Bernie, because this is the worldview that she developed as she went through life. So I'm going to give her that shout out. I'm not a Elizabeth Warren hater like many of my friends of the Bernie bro persuasion. And I think she would be a great candidate for the Democrats. That said, that's one of the dumbest political moves of all time, not to shake Bernie's hand and to listen to whoever it was in the back rooms of your campaign telling you it was a good idea to try to get women to vote for you by playing that old tune about Bernie. By the way, someone else was not feeling the love yesterday? I should say it was Martin Luther King Day, and everybody was feeling love for everybody else. Hillary Clinton still has not made her amends with Bernie Sanders. She's still hating on Bernie. I don't know if you saw that interview. Anyway, she was ripping on Bernie pretty bad. So anyway, that's my thought. Elizabeth Warren, I'm feeling a little bit sympathetic for Elizabeth Warren these days. It was a rough week for her last week. She made a mistake. She listened to some of the people in the back room who think they know everything and don't really know a whole lot, and she paid for it. But they'll throw her under the bus. Bernie bros, all right? Show a little compassion for Elizabeth Warren. We got a great show today, everyone. Maya's here already. She's all fired up. I'm sure she's going to be giving me a piece of... We're going to be talking about the 1st Congressional District. I may throw a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren question at Maya, too, if she's ready for that. Troy, she nods her head. Yeah, she's ready to rock and roll. Troy LaRaviere will be in here, the head of the Chicago Principals Association, Bernie Sanders delegate in 2016, and get his thoughts on all the political views of the day. And we have a mystery guest, D. Yeah,
really?
Yeah. In this studio, we have a mystery guest in this studio. Should I introduce our mystery guest?
A mystery guest, you say?
Yes. Thank you for playing that music. Should I introduce our mystery guest right now, or do we want to go to the news?
Well, as we spoke of before the show,
I forgot.
pre-show prep, I knew you would. You do it now.
All right. So, mystery guest, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel Ventura, and I'm running for Congress in the Congressional District of 11 of Illinois. And I want to mention something you said about MLK Day. So you talked about Bernie having 50 years. He's continuing the movement that we saw that MLK did when he was not, well-liked when he was alive, and that is the Poor People's Campaign. It is the democratic socialist that Bernie stands on today that came out of the movement of MLK. And he talked about the wealth inequalities and the right to have health care and how it wasn't just a racial issue. So tying all that together, wow, you really kicked at the Bernie bros on that one. And this is what I have to say. I see where you're coming from. And for people to consider where Warren came from, think of all of the people in her life, the friends, the family members who were Republicans who probably gave her a lot of heartache, and how she had to be not just a strong voice for the Democratic Party, but as a woman, it's hard to speak out sometimes in society. And that's one of the things that she's showing other women that they get excited about. So you want to say, playing the gender card, well, that's where it is, where women feel that they want to have a voice too, and they want people who are going to be brave enough to speak up for them. And so what I see happening with the handshake and stuff is that as progressives, what we need to do is we need to come together and not let the Biden and Buttigieg wing of the party destroy us over the things that are not important. The things that are important are passing the Green New Deal, or getting Medicare for all. And this is where both Bernie and Elizabeth do stand, and they stand united. So it's nice to see them shaking hands. It's nice to see them walking together for a movement that's so important in this country, that we need to continue to see that. So yeah, I mean, when it comes down to that convention, we need all of our delegates, whether they're Bernie or Elizabeth, fighting for the progressive platform.
Yeah, and not have a situation like we had where Hillary Clinton 4 years later is still fighting the fight from 2016. And I understand why a lot of Hillary supporters are irritated at Bernie bros, because they said a lot of nasty things about Hillary during the campaign. But Bernie himself campaigned that last month definitely hard for Hillary Clinton, and not to show any love or appreciation for Bernie for what he did I think is misguided on the part of Hillary Clinton.
Well, and the other thing that the DSA also stands for, which I really appreciate, is that they're all about inclusion, not exclusion. They want to have everybody at the table. So if we don't allow for people to adapt and come on board with the ideas, then we are turning that chair away from them, saying, no, you can't have a seat at our table because you're not a purist. Yeah. We don't want that, right? We want everyone to come and see, like you said, why do you believe in this movement? Well, I believe because it invests in people, right? It closes that wealth gap. It provides policies that are fair for everyone, not just the millionaires or those who have bought access to lawmakers, but everybody in this country, a government that works for everyone. We want people to see that. We don't want them to get distracted on handshakes. We don't want them to be distracted on the he said, she said. We want them looking at the policies and say, you know what, that's a policy that will help my family. That's a policy that's going to lower my bills or increase my pay. And that's something that's going to help the quality of life I have.
All right, but the reality is, as you know, Rachel, is that political campaigns are won on all kinds of trivialities. And there is no doubt in my mind that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren's campaigns made huge mistakes in the last 2 weeks. One, Bernie with that elite thing where they were having their little robots reading, oh, you know, she's an elitist, blah, 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 which I thought was misguided. And that really irritated Elizabeth Warren. And then they came out with the cockamamie. He said a woman can't win. And so now they're like just pecking at each other. And I swear, I have no proof of this. I got to say this. I have no proof, Rachel, that this is the case because I'm not in the back rooms, but it just sure smelled like a tactic that some little smarty pants who like, this is how we're going to win, Elizabeth Warren. We could just poke a little at the scabs and the wounds here and get some women to flip-flop from Bernie to, and it's like, what are you
Well,
thinking?
and I think that's the thing that we should be discussing, the scabs and the wounds of the female audience out there. You know, we do have, I mean, I have a male campaign manager, and we go back and forth on what the gender reality is. And I understand the fear that men have too, right? They don't want to be accused of something they haven't done. They don't want to stack the cards against them. I don't want that to happen either. But women also want to be heard and said, well, these are some things, some slights that we deal with on a daily basis, and here are some abuses we deal with too. And so the conversation we should be having is not, oh, how can we exploit this in a campaign and poke at each other? But what is it that female, the individuals need to be heard, whether it's the males who are fearful of the swing of power. And there's some legitimacy there too. I'm not trying to say that it's all made up or it's all concocted, but also why is it that women feel that they haven't had accurate voice? And we don't get accurate time sometimes on the campaign. I've seen that. You know, the incumbents that I'm running against is a male. And so 23% of Congress are females. That means if you favor the incumbent, you've already favored the male side of the audience. So one of that is an uphill battle for women to fight. And so there are times that our voice we have to be louder, we have to be stronger, and then we have to make sure we're not judged by that because you get the electability part that comes up. But at the end of the day, we need our politics to be about policies and not about entertainment.
All right, and let's just take a moment to talk about your campaign. I forced you into talking about these national political issues. Rachel was on our show, was it about a month ago?
Yeah.
I think it was right in the middle of the holidays. I think it was about a month ago. And with my mind association, I keep calling her Robin Ventura and Ace Ventura and all this stuff. But Rachel Ventura, Jesse Ventura, you're running the 11th Congressional. It's a primary, so you're running against a Democratic incumbent, Bill Foster. And the reason you happen to be at the Sun-Times today, and I said, come on into the studio, is because you met before the editorial board, you and Congressman Foster. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so right off the bat, they talked about as our top issues, and I was disappointed that Foster talked about AI, artificial intelligence, as the number one issue. And, rightfully so, I said to him, as a scientist, you should be embarrassed that climate crisis was not your answer, because that is the issue. And then that trickles down into the wealth inequality we have and how it's going to hit people hardest who are poor, people of color, people who live on the coastal lines, people's jobs who are in the fossil fuel industry right now, refineries, and the Green New Deal would help alleviate that for those who are going to be hit hardest. And the fact that he didn't even talk about climate at all in the top three issues. He talked about opioids, he talked about artificial intelligence and infrastructure. And at the end of the day, he's out of touch. He's the 34th richest person in Congress. He's a multimillionaire. He doesn't understand what the struggles of most people in his district. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs. I know what it's like to balance. Do I pay for health care or do I pay my electric bill?
And so is your sense when you go out and you meet editorial boards like the Chicago Sun-Times, which is a little different audience than talking to me. Let's be
bit.
honest, a little bit. When you move to the center and you leave the shelter of the left, like this little shelter we have here, this little room, do you sense that there's hostility? Do you sense there's people want to marginalize you? They roll their eyes at you?
There's the criticism that, can we do this? And that's such a frustrating. And we talked about this last time I was on the show that, they always ask, how do you pay for that? Well, how did we pay for the $22 billion increase in the national defense budget that they just passed? The endless wars, the fact that Trump is trying to get us in a war with Iran. I mean, how do we pay for that? So it's very frustrating when you hear that. But the reality is there are savings. So, Medicare for All came up, and the Sun-Times, questioned me, we've heard the Elizabeth Warren and Bernie side of it, but we also heard the other side of it. And is this practical? And are we just being impatient? Is my generation just being impatient on these bills? That was a question that was brought up. And the thing I have to say about that, especially when it comes to climate, is we're out of time. By the time I get elected to Congress, we will have 10 years to make real change before we see some casualties, like some very significant casualties. So we don't have the luxury of sitting around for the next 70 years debating this. And the reality is the fossil fuel industry has spent the last 30 years trying to hide the fact that they knew their product was endangering everyone's lives. And so when it comes to Medicare for All, health. Every year when insurance denies the claims of people, 40,000 people die every single year. That's unfathomable. We're supposed to have the best health care in the world, but then why do we have such high casualties? Why does our life expectancy continue to decrease as our profits or as our pay to healthcare increases? We're twice as expensive as any other country out there with healthcare, and yet we don't have the same coverage for most Americans. It's unfathomable.
Yeah.
So the time thing, it's important. Lives are on the line. So we're out of time. And my generation sees that. Millennials and the next generation after me see that. And they know, again, the struggle is that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And as long as we allow that to happen, people will suffer.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's so funny. You're impatient. I mean, I'm an old geezer. I've been waiting for Medicare for All for the 50s. Well, I was just a little kid. Even I was just a little kid in the 50s. But I mean, so I don't buy into the impatience at all. I mean, why aren't the the rich guys who are, when they want tax breaks, why aren't they impatient about their tax breaks?
Right. Yeah. Well, the other thing about this too is, I think we talked a little bit before about old power versus new power. And new power is the ability to get resources yourself, whether it's education, money. In the past, old power, they would reserve that. They would gatekeep that, right? You had to go to a priest to have someone read the Bible to you. You had to go to the rich or, highly educated to get your answers. And only certain people could go down that path. Well, with modern technology, we all have the ability to check out WebMD and then be an advocate for ourselves when we go see our doctor. We can look up information. We can learn to read very easily now in public schools. And so this allows people to take control of their lives. And so when I hear that argument about, people are just impatient, no, I think they're more informed.
Yeah.
I think that they see what's happening and they're tired of having the wool pulled over our eyes. And we're saying, no, stop putting our taxpayer dollars in the fossil fuel industry, into big pharma, into the military industrial complex, and start putting it back in people. It's our taxpayer dollars. They should be coming back to our communities, back to projects that help us.
Okay, Rachel Ventura, she's running for Congress in the 11th Congressional District. We're going to, Dennis has got a bunch of news he wants to read. Rachel, stick around. Maybe she has a few thoughts on the news of the day.
Rachel, where can people find more info about you?
electventura.com. Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
By the way, Rachel, can we just take a pause? Look
I know.
at that young man with that tie, huh?
They'd be a fool not to hire you.
That website one more time.
electventura.com.
All right.
They would be a fool not to hire this young man, but he would still be on the Ben Joravsky show, right, D?
Yeah.
All right. He had best of both worlds. All right, young man. Speaking of which, he's the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. And as Rachel Ventura can tell you, back in Alton, they call him Dr. Doobie. What's the news, young man?
Nobody calls me that. All right, everyone. Let's unpack the news that's happened in Chicago and or Illinois this week thus far. And it's this week's hottest dance craze in Illinois. All together, everyone, let's all do the Illinois Senate Shuffle. Slide to the left.
Oh, yeah.
Slide to the left again. Guys, it's a real easy dance. They're all Democrats. So just slide to the left over and over again.
Well, they moved back to the center a little bit with that one. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, enough dancing.
We got to get down to business.
Illinois Senator and Illinois Senate President John Cullerton has officially resigned After Sunday's vote, we now have a new Illinois Senate president. It's Don Harmon. More on that in moments. But first, Ben Joravsky, you know how fast the news cycle goes these days. Unless we find out he did something very corrupt, which in Illinois isn't impossible. But John Cullerton will soon be yesterday's news. Any final political words that you'd like to say about the now resigned Senate President Cullerton?
Johnny Cullerton, north side of Chicago, Democrat, is sort of the, he's a centrist. That's the role he played in Springfield. And more often than not, as I've said before, he was the leader who was called on by Mayor Rahm Emanuel to torpedo progressive legislation like that people in the city of Chicago want. We're going to have Troy LaRaviere in the studio a little while ago. Elected school board was something that Troy was advocating many years ago, and it would die in the Senate where John Cullerton reigned. So some of the issues that Robin was talking about on a national level, the struggle between moderate Democrats and progressive Democrats, are embodied by the role that John Cullerton played. Rachel, get your thoughts on this. I'll throw you into the hot seat here. Where a Democrat has power, but instead of using that power to really push for progressive programs or proposals, what they do is they use that power to bottle them up and then tell the progressives, you're impatient, you're just pushing too far to the left, we have to worry about the middle. And this is a role that I've seen Democrats do for years and years and years. Instead of using the power that they have to push hard and force the conversation to the left, they kind of use the power they have to undercut the left and keep things in the middle or move it to the right. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that our state needs to be dealing with right now is the education and property taxes. And so instead of moving our education funding towards coming out of our income taxes, we rely heavily on our property taxes. So something like 14% of our schools, it's funded 14% out of our income tax. The rest is our property taxes. Other states have, Hawaii has 100% out of their income tax. I think California is creeping up to 70%. But most countries, or most states, are well over 14%. So the problem is then we create a divide amongst what type of education you get. And then it forces federal dollars to invest in these Title I schools that just can't afford. Joliet has many Title I schools. And so you got Naperville's got a surplus of property tax dollars for their schools. They're literally cutting checks back to people who live in those in the cities. But then you have places like Joliet that need extra funding. Whereas if we had even just 70% of our schools were funded through our income tax, then it would really close that divide. And then the 30% extra from your property taxes, first of all, it would create a very low property tax bill, since the number one thing that creeps up our tax bill is our education costs. But then you would still have, maybe a little bit better in areas that are more affluent and versus the ones that are not, but it wouldn't cripple or handicap those schools. And so that's really where, that shouldn't be a progressive issue, right? Every Democrat, every Republican should be pushing for good education in the state.
It should only be a progressive issue. Not just everybody. And by the way, Michael Madigan on this particular issue wasn't great for years. He stifled attempts to have a fair tax because he thought it would work against some of his legislators. So it wasn't just Cullerton, in all fairness, on this particular issue. Maya, you got any thoughts about Cullerton before I go back to Dennis for more news updates?
I am very curious what will happen to the rent control push now in Springfield, because Cullerton was the number one stumbling block for both the repeal of the Rent Control Preemption Act and also the considering the proposed actually establishing rent control statewide. So Cullerton was like the huge impediment to movement on those bills and any meaningful discussion on them. So yeah, I'm curious to see, what's going to happen now? But from what I understand, who's the person that's replacing
Don
him?
Harmon from Oak Park. We're going to get in. Dennis has a little more on this. But,
I don't know how connected he is to the real estate industry, but maybe he won't be that different.
I would take maybe out of that sentence.
By Friday, we were down to two choices for Illinois Senate President. Senators Don Harmon and Kimberly, not Lightford, Kimberly Lightford. A secret ballot went down on Sunday. Which Democrats were involved in the vote? Shh. It's a secret. But apparently there were 39 of them. The mysterious votes were tallied, and it was Lightford 17, Don Harmon 22. After the results were in, both Harmon and Lightford went behind closed doors to cut a deal. You gotta love Illinois politics. Secret ballots and backroom deals right in your face in the news. Lightford's team offered up their terms. Harmon said, yeah, okay, sure. They moved the vote to the full Senate, and the deal was done. Harmon won the seat. Since the vote, news broke that Senator Kimberly Lightford accused fellow Senator Emil Jones and his father, a former Senate president himself, of conspiring against her efforts to secure the Senate president gig. She felt betrayed, she told the Chicago Sun-Times. Lightford said Jones' father, Emil Jones Jr., had an issue with women. Lightford still saw the Joneses as friends and felt deceived when her fellow senators stood behind Harmon. He said he wanted to be with the winner. Like his father, he knows how to count votes. All right, now to the other Cullerton gig. Don Harmon is Senate president. We got that. Now, who's going to replace Cullerton's actual gig as state senator? Tonight, Illinois State Rep Sarah Feigenholtz is expected to be named to fill John Cullerton's state Senate seat. Democratic members are scheduled to meet at Sheffield's Beer Garden for the vote, as long as it's not that place where they have those big drinks that Eddie Johnson went to, all right? No big drinks.
Series?
Yeah.
I think they should
there.
have it at series. Might
Yeah.
make for some interesting discussion.
As long as it's not there. Feigenholtz has already gained the endorsement of key members on the committee, and she has served for damn near 25 years in the House. Ben, what do we know about Feigenholtz, and will she make a good senator?
I don't know about the latter, but Sarah Feigenholtz is your traditional lakefront liberal. She's been a state rep from, I forget what district it is. I know it's around Belmont. I used to see her at Ann Sather's, your favorite restaurant on
Tom Tunney's, Tommy Tunney's fiefdom.
In fact, the last time I saw Sarah Feigenholtz, by chance, I had been hanging out with Maya. We had gone to the inauguration where Lori Lightfoot gave that speech, blasting the alderman. And then I went home and I said, you know what, I need a sweet roll. So I went in a cinnamon roll, and I went to Ann Sather's, and there was young Tom Tunney at the same table as Sarah Feigenholtz. She was his guest, if you recall. Remember, each alderman got to bring a guest up. Anyway, so
What was Tom Tunney eating?
I did not
His own
say.
rolls?
That was good.
She's good.
Correct.
Maya, we're playing at Zany's next.
What? but here's the question then: who's going to take her state house seat?
Oh, well, that's they're going to cut a deal, and I think I'm just blanked on his name. Posner is his name, and I think they already cut that deal pretty much. You know, it's like there's no real lefties. There's no, she's going to get mad at me for saying this. There's no real Rachel Ventura's running, and you know what I'm saying? It's all centrists. And
I ran against the will of my party, so.
You ran against the what of your party?
The will of the Democratic Party when I ran for Will County. Yeah. They didn't want a leftist running, but the people did.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, like how would that area, would they go for a really like a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren? I'm going to throw Elizabeth some love there, all right? I feel there's a lot of bit of bashing of Elizabeth Warren. A leftist on social issues in that area, I don't know how it, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking of the aldermen in that area. I'm thinking of the state reps in that area. Kelly Cassidy is a little to the north, and so she always says her district's the most left in the whole state. But there really are no Bernie-style Democrats from that area. So I don't know if it's because the Democratic Party has lost its convictions in that area, or maybe people like me of the left are the minority. You couldn't win if that way, but that's reality.
We'll keep you posted on all things Illinois Senate news as today's program rolls along. But finally, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
I'm not a perfect person.
I am so proud of you. And Ben, maybe he listens after all. He may have taken my advice, because today on our Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker schedule, he's not in Chicago. Finally. He's been in Chicago every day at that Thompson Center. Today he's in Carbondale at the Banterra Center to speak at the deployment ceremony for the Illinois Army National Guard. Then he's off to SIUE Carbondale to speak about Rebuild Illinois and investments in the university. And if he's smart, he'll talk to these downstaters into signing on for that fair tax initiative that he'd prefer get voted in.
Yeah, fair tax is the big political fight in Illinois in the coming year. I don't know if it's going to get the attention it deserves. Rachel Ventura, let me ask you this. As a candidate for the Democratic primary, are you going to run in favor of the fair tax? Or are you going to run away from the whole issue?
I do believe that we need to be taxing people fairly. I've talked about a wealth tax, whether it's Warren's plan, Bernie's, or AOC. In 1981, when I was born, we had a marginal tax rate of 70% in this country, and we haven't seen one since those years. So it's time that the rich pay their fair share. So I think the fair tax could have been structured a little stronger, maybe a bigger decrease on the lower end and a higher increase on the higher end. But I am in favor of the rich paying their fair share. So fair tax it is.
And we can't do the local news without finding out what Lori Lightfoot's up today.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is at Rush University Medical Center to deliver remarks on health equity at the launch of Affirm, the Rush Center for Gender, Sexuality, and Reproductive Health. So there you are, everybody. We'll keep you posted on those stories as today's program rolls along, and that's what's going on locally. Ventura, one more time.
electventura.com.
Go check it out, and don't go anywhere. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
When you lose a loved one whose wishes were to be cremated, Chicagoland Cremation Options provides your family a dignified and affordable cremation service. Chicagoland Cremation Options helps you bypass the expensive overhead of a funeral home or cemetery by streamlining the cremation directly. It saves you sometimes thousands of dollars. Chicagoland Cremation Options Crematory, just south of O'Hare, 5 minutes west of Chicago. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend Douglas Klein. You can find them at ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
How did you go from sharing stories over the years to deciding to write a book?
Good question, Mayor. Good question.
Rahm Emanuel, winners and losers tonight, if any.
Well, there is a lot of people got a chance to advance their campaign. I actually, if you look at the whole field, I think that Vice President Biden did, Senator Warren did. I do think that Mayor Pete, Amy, Senator Klobuchar, and Senator Harris all got a chance to advance their campaign. They had moments that will be taken away. I think the biggest loser in this is obviously former Secretary Castro, that I think had a moment that he actually went tougher and meaner, and it had a streak that is not going to work for him. I do think this. I think the party, I would say the first two debates, the party did not do well. I actually think the party this time as a whole, we showed as the slew of candidates collectively, you walk away.
All right, that's enough, Mayor Ron. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, I just got a text from our next guest, Roy LaRaviere.
Awesome. You are just a multitasking guy today.
No, but he sent me an article to read. Apparently he's been listening to me defending Elizabeth Warren, so an article critical of Elizabeth Warren. I got to read it.
We've been doing 5 things at once today. Read that, interview Maya at the same time, and grab Troy when he gets here. Let's do that.
Busy day on the Ben Joravsky Show. Maya, before we have like 3 things I have to do with you before we get to what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So
let's get through them, Ben, because we don't have that much time left, and I want to talk about something very important. So
let's start with number 1.
We got a lot of time. Number 1.
First Tuesdays coming up at the Hideout on November I mean,
November.
February.
I'm like, that's what threw me.
February 4th.
February
I'm
4th.
like, November.
First Tuesday, February 4th, we've got our great debate show with Carlos Ramirez Rosa, proxy for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and Brandon Johnson, Cook County Commissioner, proxy for the Elizabeth Warren campaign. We're bringing them together on stage. We're going to be talking to them about the candidates they're representing and that they're stumping for out there. We're going to talk about similarities and differences between the two, and more importantly, what a winning strategy for the left in 2020 might look like. This isn't going to be some kind of Jerry Springer thing,
Or will it?
Look, the point is not. The point is that I think you and I are interested in how we can kind of expand the tent around these progressive ideas, and rather than just have this be some kind of like who's better, type of fight. So should be an interesting conversation. We'll have some, plenty of room to ask some challenging questions for both of them. That is, again, February 4th, 6:30 at the Hideout. Give them the address, Ben.
1354 West Wabansia.
That's correct.
And these have been selling out every month that we've done them so far. So I encourage everyone to grab a ticket early and often.
Yeah.
$5.
And perfect timing. Talk about organic here. Like that when I saw the handshake thing go down, I'm like, first Tuesday.
Well,
it's going to get rowdy. We
yeah.
got like Dragon Slayer 19. He weighed in. He said, cage match.
That's exactly what Maya doesn't want to do, all right?
Yeah, though this whole thing about the handshake and the sexism and all this stuff, I'm sad to see it personally. I'm sad to see it because this is not helpful or productive for the overall cause, so to speak, the overall movement. If these guys are fighting between themselves, that's kind of my position on this.
I'm with you 100% on that one. I thought it was. I still believe that it was a tactic and a strategy that Elizabeth Warren's campaign decided to employ to exploit something that they learn in their polls. Because let's face it, Maya, you know as well as I do that the tactical end of campaigning involves polls, dirty politics, hitting low, and negativity.
And it also you have to ask yourself the question: who is that effective messaging for? Who is it aimed to shore up, to put out this idea that Bernie Sanders might have some kind of sexist notion of a woman not being able to be president? Who is that aimed at? And that's aimed at white women. They're trying. That's a strategy to siphon white women away from Bernie Sanders, and they, because I can't imagine a constituency or a kind of demographic, I guess, of people who other than white women who would really be seriously perturbed about that. Like there are plenty of other issues. I don't know what the polling is like for Bernie with black voters, men and women, if it's been, what the numbers are separated out. But I just feel like it's just, I feel like people in the African-American community who are already progressive and sort of on the left side of things, this thing about, Bernie doesn't think a woman can win in 2020. That's it's like aimed at someone who isn't thinking very deeply about what's really at stake and like the policies and stuff. And I just think that's this is like a certain kind of thing that's meant to appeal to white women in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I had a similar thought that it was the product, a strategy that was born out of a focus group or a poll. It's just smelled of one.
Yeah.
And similarly, what Bernie did with his the little script he had people reading about the elitists, linking Elizabeth Warren to elitists. I'm sure their focus groups so that, that's where she's vulnerable. She was a Harvard professor. There's a sense that people with higher education are for Elizabeth Warren. So we're going to exploit that. I think both are do a detriment to the larger cause of progressivity. I think that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren should be commended for the voices they add to the discussions, and I just think these are trivial, frivolous attacks.
Yeah, and I think that
do no
people
good.
who are paying serious attention to these candidates are not. I don't think these are issues that they're gonna change their mind about their candidates over. Yeah.
Well, what it does is it reinforces certain biases that people have. I'll probably talk about this more with Troy, but when Hillary Clinton came out today, I don't know if you saw this, bashing Bernie in an interview. And I know a lot of people, older people, generally speaking, I'm going to just throw that out there, who just have a visceral reaction against Bernie Sanders that's left over from 2016. Now, if he's the nominee, would they sit it out? Hard for me to imagine that. But it's just discontent. It makes it more difficult to build alliances. And it's a distraction. So effectively, this just reinforces attitudes that people already have.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears to what you really want to talk about.
Yeah.
A very fascinating story that's brewing in the 1st Congressional District.
Oh,
Talk
yeah.
about
So
this.
the Hyde Park Herald the other day published a very interesting story about one of the candidates challenging Bobby Rush. There's 3 of them running. One of them is this woman, Sarah Gadd. And the Herald found that Sarah Gadd appeared, or people associated with her campaign, appeared to be managing fake social media accounts that were supporting Sarah Gadd online. So the Herald published this story that shows that some of these accounts that are frequently tweeting or posting things that are supportive of Gadd's candidacy, like the photos of these, somebody is claimed to be working for the ACLU, and it turns out that person doesn't exist. A bunch of the photos that were used as the profile pictures for these accounts are traced back to this is an Indian cricket player. And not a local voter that's supporting Sarah Gadd. That's who the picture is of. Other ones, it was a Black Lives Matter protester in Houston, I think. There was just random assortment of avatars that are pulled off of pictures off the internet. And this is all, the Sarah Gadd's campaign has vehemently denied that they're behind these fake accounts, but at the same time, a couple of key people in her campaign have resigned recently, and it's possible that it's over these kinds of issues and over the way that she's been running this campaign. But what was particularly funny to me is that so Sarah Gadd did not speak with the Hyde Park Herald for this story. I guess they reached out to her and she did not comment. So yesterday, the reporter who wrote the story, Aaron Gettinger, was tweeting about the story and the findings, and he showed examples of these posts that appear to be actually people within Sarah Gadd's campaign that are making these social media posts. And Sarah Gadd ultimately responded to this to his tweets, and she said, I failed to respond because I'm busy running this. She's responding to the reporter and a bunch of other people who were tagged on these posts, including myself. And she wrote, I failed to respond because I'm busy running a campaign, my nonprofits, and preparing for an upcoming campaign, job fair / expungement clinic. I can't respond to daily messages from a tabloid newspaper harassing me every day for comments about meaningless fabricated stories. This is for a political candidate to be calling a political reporter's work in a community newspaper, which is most definitely not a tabloid newspaper. To be responding in this way is just seems like a bad call. This is amateur hour over here. Whoever is working on her campaign messaging, this is just an absurd response. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to deflect and deny that you're maybe involved in something like this, but the fact that she called him a tabloid is really just very ridiculous. And then she subsequently blocked the Hyde Park Herald reporter on Twitter. He posted a screenshot of that. So, it's kind of, I suppose it's not a very surprising story. I mean, she also the Hyde Park Herald reported that she claimed that she was in medical school at the University of Chicago and she wasn't. And I guess she's at the law school there. But anyway, the thing that I think perturbs me about all of this and about just this notion of candidates having fake social media accounts, supposedly supporting them and whatever, it's that, like, we all know that, like, elections are now more than ever fraught with all kinds of interference in the social media sphere, that there's all kinds of fake accounts, managed by Russian troll farms and other kind of foreign actors who want to sow chaos and, confuse and discombobulate people. So there's just a general tanking of faith in the democratic process. And it hurts our kind of, civil society and our political culture that there's like so much discord and disinformation sowed in the social media sphere. To have like a candidate participate in this is really like, it's really nuts, because like, I mean, candidates do all kinds of dirty playing, in the process of campaigning, especially in Chicago and Cook County. But like to like add more to the already chaotic scene that is like social media with like all kinds of fake accounts and fake support groups and whatever, to have like candidates themselves be tangled up with that and doing that kind of thing is really like, I just think it's a disgrace.
Well, it's so hard to believe anything anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then when it's a candidate doing it, but allegedly, it's like, it's yeah.
I have this. I sort of a joke, but I kind of believe it as well. I always say, never believe anything, the good things a candidate says about him or herself, and never believe the bad things they say about their opponent in a flyer. You get those flyers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of my joke that I've been making, and I'm kind of coming to that. I mean, we've seen, I don't know if you've been following this one. This was not on my homework list of things for you to study, but the Bernie Sanders versus Joe Biden issue over Social Security and claims that Bernie Sanders people have made about Joe Biden in regards to his record on Social Security is a classic example of this. And then the counterclaims of Joe Biden about what Bernie Sanders is doing. So Bernie Sanders made up a position that Joe Biden had taken in remarks that was clearly erroneous. Joe Biden was not making those remarks regarding Social Security, so Bernie was wrong to do that. Then Joe Biden countered by saying that Bernie had doctored video of him saying things. Bernie did not doctor the video, so Joe Biden's defense of Bernie Sanders' accusations were in themselves inaccurate. So to a certain degree, Maya, you can't believe, once you get into that furious exchange of a political campaign where they're just throwing punches at each other, it's really hard to make sense of anything at all. But yes, this goes one step beyond that.
Yeah, and the bigger issue here, again, like this woman is one of 3 candidates challenging Bobby Rush. The other ones are Robert Emmons and Amina Matthews, who, but they're trying to take out Bobby Rush.
Yeah.
Like the Obama stumbling block. Tell people about what Bobby Rush means and what an attempt to challenge him in an election really entails.
Wow. I could go on and on. I'm really going to try to focus on this one, Maya, because Bobby Rush, when I just think of Bobby Rush, it opens up so much history. That's really history that I've lived through here in the city of Chicago. Bobby Rush first became well known to the public in the late 60s when he was one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party. in the city of Chicago. I don't know if he was the number 2 or number 3 to Fred Hampton, but he was high up there. He was very young. He was in his early 20s, I want to say. He had just gotten out of the military. He was in the Army. He's from the north side of Chicago, and that's where he was raised. And so anyway, and when Fred Hampton was killed in a police raid, Bobby Rush had to go underground. He was very concerned that the police were going to come after him next. And I remember, I just was a little kid reading newspapers, and I was obsessive then as I am now, that it was like Jesse Jackson, a very young Jesse Jackson, was the one who gave shelter to Bobby Rush. I was very concerned that he himself, Bobby Rush, would be the next victim. And so he emerged with certain bona fides as a result of that, like a courageous voice for black empowerment. Who would stand up even at the risk of losing his life. That is currency, political currency, Maya, that is not cheap. It means something. It's very valuable. And so fast forward about 13 years later, I want to say, Bobby Rush first ran for office. He ran for alderman in, was it the second ward? And he beat the incumbent, and he was aligned with Harold Washington. And so, again,
so he was in the city council during the Washington years.
That is correct.
Okay.
He was elected in 1983 to the city council. He was part of the Washington movement when Harold Washington was. This is ancient history, but when Harold Washington was elected mayor of the city of Chicago, it did not just mean that there was a change at the top. Harold Washington swept out of office, I forget, like 5 or 6, I want to say, black aldermen who were loyal to Jane Byrne, and one of them was, I believe his name was Barnett. Can't believe I remember that, who was the alderman that Bobby Rush defeated. So Bobby Rush was very much a Harold Washington ally in the city council throughout the 80s. And then, irony of ironies, in 1992, Harold, of course, was dead. Bobby Rush ran against an incumbent congressman named Charlie Hayes, who was a labor leader. And Charlie Hayes had been a very close ally of Harold Washington. Harold Washington is the reason. Harold Washington had held that seat, first congressional, and he basically ushered it over to Charlie Hayes, even though most black nationalists were for Lou Palmer. This is ancient history that only I remember and a few other old timers. But the point is that Bobby Rush showed he had political chops. You know, he knew how to organize a campaign, run a campaign, at least in the black community, and he used that reputation I talked about from the Black Panther days to defeat Charlie Hayes. And since then, he's been unbeatable. In 2000, as you pointed out, a young man named Barack Obama had the temerity to run against Bobby Rush, got clobbered.
Yeah, I mean, he's a beloved figure, and in terms of in terms of his legislative sort of history, you know, what has he done for his district in Congress or for Chicago? What do you identify with him as in terms of his achievements in Congress?
Well, that said, Bobby Rush I would not put Bobby Rush in the same pantheon of progressive leaders as Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Harold Washington. You know, from his days in Congress, Bobby Rush has been your standard Democrat. If somebody else is proposing something that's progressive, probably supported, but he's not going to be the person that brings it to the table.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to be somebody who really has forged a career in Congress as like the face of.
No.
The face of it. I mean, it's like not like Luis Gutierrez, who, you know, was like a nationally recognized person in Congress on certain issues.
Yes.
Right. I can't think of anything Bobby Rush has been at the forefront of.
That's what I'm saying.
As a congressperson, which, you know, makes it like sort of not surprising at all that he frequently has challengers in these elections. But it's like he knows how to play this game. And so like it's just I feel like if you're gonna have the audacity to run against him, like, what, you know, you can't be having like fake social media accounts,
well,
like that can be easily traced back and like completely damage your legitimacy. Like it's just like you've already got like Mount Everest to climb.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's also a generational issue, which we could get into as well. Bobby Rush has got to be in his 70s. He's been around forever. And so, by the way, on local issues, he endorsed Bill Daley. Remember that in the last mayoral?
Ooh, yeah.
And then he flip-flopped, turned right around and endorsed Tony Preckwinkle and was, ripping. He really irritated Lori Lightfoot to no end with the speech he made. I forget exactly what he said, but I remember at the time it was inflammatory. It irritated Lori Lightfoot, and she probably holds a grudge against Tony Preckwinkle ever since. Lori doesn't forget these things. She's a little like me in that way, Maya. We don't forget grudges. And so, it's kind of a confusing, checkered career. Supporting Bill Daley, what's that all about? I mean, supporting so he, like on local issues, Bobby Rush. I think of all the great progressive issues of our time that we've written about at the Chicago Reader. Bobby Rush has not been on the front lines of any of those issues. He's been away, and he's like a typical congressman in that regard.
Yeah.
He doesn't pay attention to what's going on, except in Chicago, except to drop in from time to time and make an endorsement in a certain campaign.
Yeah,
but
he's just the congressman. Like that's his role. Like he continues to be in Congress.
That said, he's Bobby Rush.
But he's Bobby Rush.
He was there in 1969 when Fred Hampton was killed in his sleep. He's got currency. He's got name recognition.
Totally.
And he's got legitimacy because of that. And here's something else, Ma. I'd love to get your feelings on this. This gets into generational issues. Older voters, and I know this breed very well, they're very slow to embrace something new. They won't even embrace Bernie. You know what I'm saying? Well, he's that they get stuck in their ways.
And Bobby Rush is always there.
So it's going to be very hard for a millennial. Yeah, Bobby Rush. I remember Bobby Rush, and there's pictures with Bobby Rush. Same thing, let's not just pick on Bobby Rush. Jan Schakowsky in the ninth. I don't think any millennial could defeat Jan Schakowsky in the ninth. Older voters would rally to her. Danny K. Davis in the seventh. He's got two candidates. Keena Collins is running against him. And that's an uphill battle. Older voters. They're very loyal.
Well, but the difference with the first district, though, is that this includes like sections of Hyde Park. There's the kind of there's younger people there. There's students there. This is like it's not just like a settled kind of older homeowner population. So, but that being said, I really think that all of these candidates have. This is like a very hard road, and quite aside from voter, Bobby Rush having been being seen so favorably in the community and whatever, like he knows how to play this politics game, better than anyone. Like, I mean, of the people challenging him, the candidate that I'm finding that I'd be most curious to see like what their ground game is like is Amina Matthews.
I'll bring her on the show.
Yeah, she's got a lot of history in the community, of a lot of community-oriented work, a lot of anti-violence work, and I would say that she's like has a lot of name and face recognition. So, but I don't know if she really has a chance.
I'll definitely bring her on the show. See what she has to say. I'm open to new voices like. We just had Rachel Ventura on the show, and just new progressive voices I think are very important for the Democratic Party. But again, these attitudes are so strong. I was just listening yesterday. I don't know if, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this. I'm throwing this at you without any preparation. But the New York Times had their endorsement session, and then where they endorsed Amy Klobuchar. And Elizabeth couldn't pick one person.
You can't sit on two chairs.
Yeah.
You can't, this is like something we say in Russian, like
say it in Russian.
Well, it sort of depends situationally on like when someone is doing that, человек пытается сидеть на двух стульях. Like it's a person who's trying to sit on two chairs, which is like
Well, I just got to say.
I'm sure it's going to work out great for the New York Times because this is all here we are talking about it. People are clicking on it. It's fine. But it's like, it's bleak.
All right, let's just say something.
It's bleaker than the Tribune endorsing Gary Johnson.
Wow. Whoa.
Mind blown. Look at this guy.
You want to hear about spineless moves? You know,
Wow.
like
I gotta
the
think about
Tribune
that.
endorsing Gary Johnson is still, in my book, the most spineless thing any media organization has ever done in this arena.
Wow, I got to think about that. I tend to go off on passionate tangents denouncing the Chicago Tribune for endorsing Gary Johnson.
You can't beat up on them too badly right now.
Well,
though.
actually, can I just do a shout out to Mary Wisniewski and Charlie Johnson, two of our brothers and sisters in the union.
Yeah.
Let's put that out there.
They're really facing some bleak times right now.
were
So
here.
everybody better read the Tribune.
They were here in this studio on Friday. We did an interview talking about the changes that the Tribune is confronting since this hedge fund, Alden Capital, bought a majority stake. They bought Michael Farrow's stake out, and there's really a threat of layoffs and buyouts and just reducing the scope of what the Tribune could do. Mary and Charlie did a great job of talking about it. I urge everybody, not now, but to check out that download. And after today's show, and I'll say this, I say this all the time. The Chicago Tribune's editorial voice is utterly baffling. Sometimes I think it's just like a parody, and it's just we'll learn later that it was just all some kind of inside joke, and they were really in on it. That's the only thing that would justify some of the silly things they've written, but. The journalists at the Tribune, I can't give them enough love.
Yeah, but the issue of
people
the
who do
editorial
yes.
board endorsement, the New York Times endorsing Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren is absurd.
Okay, so here's part of what they did was they released. I spent a lot of time yesterday doing this, listening to their podcast where the editorial board members explained why they divided their votes between Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar and froze Bernie out. That was like and Biden. But
let's hear it.
All right. But well, I don't believe what they said. I believe they couldn't make up their mind. I believe they didn't want to take a definitive stand on the battle between progressives and centrists in the Democratic Party because they're just like the Chicago Tribune in this regard. They didn't want to alienate their readers by taking a strong stand, and they knew that their readers are split, so they just cut
Amy
down the
Klobuchar,
difference.
have you actually met an Amy Klobuchar voter? Have you met a single person who's into Amy Klobuchar? Because I have yet to have a face-to-face conversation. I've met Mayor Pete people, I've met Biden people, Bernie people, Warren people, Cory Booker people, Kamala Harris people. I have yet to encounter in real life, face-to-face, a person who's into Amy Klobuchar.
I'm trying to think if I have. She's on my list of 5. You have to do 5. I make my list. The guests come in.
You have to do 5.
I know. Most of them don't do 5. I got to tell you that, Maya.
What do you mean do 5?
My top 5. So
candidates.
You got 5 candidates. Can you name 5 Democrats? Put them in order. Like if you had a vote right now, which would your order be? So you're number 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, you're 5. I say get it down to 5. It could change.
So you're saying you haven't even met someone who put them on their 5?
Amy Klobuchar is she's one of my 5.
But there's like 6 of them left.
Well,
How
there's
many
actually more than 6.
Exactly.
Oh, well, actually, there's more than 6. There's Bloomberg. He's running.
Tom Steyer doesn't count.
Why does that? You have an interesting. Why does he not count? Tulsi Gabbard's still running, so she could be in there.
All right. Well, listen.
Michael Bennet, I believe, is
super
running.
evasive, man. I'm asking you if
No,
you
the answer
ever
is
met
no.
somebody who's
No.
excited about Amy Klobuchar.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Dennis, have you met somebody who's excited about Amy Klobuchar?
Not in person, no.
No. Exactly.
Have you ever
That's
met
what I'm
one and
saying.
not in person?
Well, I know Bill Maher goes on and on
Oh
about
yeah,
Amy
Bill Maher.
Klobuchar.
That's right. I just
Wow,
listened to his.
what a horrible endorsement.
Come on, people. Bill Maher.
Yeah.
Amy
No.
Klobuchar.
Yeah, no, that's it. Bill Maher's the only person, and by the way, she's not even in his top. I don't even think he would vote for her. He just
No, he just no. It's because he doesn't want to. He doesn't. He.
So what do you think that was all about? What do you think the New York Times was all about when they?
No, it's what you said. It's to not alienate too many of their readers. Their
why
job
not
is to sell newspapers.
So why not go for Joe Biden? I mean, if you want a centrist, go for a centrist that somebody's supporting.
I don't know, because no, you don't really want to, you don't want that would be embarrassing. His likelihood of winning is so low that like it would really be embarrassing if the New York Times was like coming out hot and strong for him.
I would say that Joe Biden has a greater chance of being elected president in 2020 than Amy Klobuchar.
Okay, true, but if he loses and they endorsed him, that's more embarrassing than if Amy Klobuchar does, which she will. And they endorsed her. Like I think that like being, I think yeah. I don't know.
It was very bizarre. But anyway, one of the revealing aspects of their thought process was revealed in a taping where one of the editors said, I can't remember which one, they were just voices on a podcast, said that Bernie Sanders can't win, I'm paraphrasing here, because he's supported by young people. And one thing we've learned, young people don't vote, and this election will be determined by older voters. Young people don't. And they were just dismissing Bernie on the electability issue, and it was just this dismissive, disdainful attitude about young voters in general, and the whole notion, really, that the Democrats can win by doing the things that you've been talking about for months on this show, building their base, generating more passion among younger voters and voters who don't ordinarily vote, marginalized voters as they call them, and they just sort of dismiss that. That's not going to work. It may get him 30% of the vote.
Once again, I just want to remind everybody, these are the same people who were completely sure that Donald Trump could not win an election. Mm-hmm. So just, this is all meaningless. This is just filling up time and space and newsprint with the conversation of the day.
All right, very good. Maya, before I let you go, anything else you want to say, anything you want to promote, any articles you want to talk about other than of our February 4th appearance at the Hideout?
Just a reminder about the February 4th appearance at the Hideout. Everybody should come out. I think it'll be a good conversation.
I agree. We'll once more time, Carlos Ramirez Rosa and Brandon Johnson. Maya, thank you so much. We got Troy LaRaviere on deck. We're going to bring him on when we return.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Guys, hang tight with us, all right? If you're listening live, Ben went to go grab our next guest, Mr. Troy LaRaviere. Usually gets in the building on his own. Guess he couldn't get in this time on his own, so Ben went down to grab him. Just hang tight with us, everybody. Troy LaRaviere on the way. Live stream chat. What's happening? You guys are very chatty today. That's excellent. Brianna, J. Marie, Dragon Slayer. Johnny Joe, what's up, my man? Pat Rod, what's happening? Weigh in with your thoughts here. Looks like you guys are going back and forth on that old New York Times endorsement. Troy LaRaviere coming up. Well, people asking about my tie. Bruce asked, why the tie? I had a job interview today. Part-time job, not going anywhere, guys. It's got to make a little more money, you know what I mean? More money, more problems. I'd like to find out. Something worth experimenting if you ask me. All right, that's why the tie. Had a job interview. Part-time. Still going to be on the show. All right, Troy LaRaviere coming up.
Pianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
You're no longer mayor of Chicago. You're not holding public office right now, so you don't have to watch what you say. Not that you ever did that
I don't.
much.
I was going to say, yeah, that was not really. That I don't think you have to worry about that.
But now you can prepare to be Rombo again, the neutron Rom. Just blow up the place.
Where's Waldo?
Ben, you didn't just call me boy, did you?
No.
You better not have.
No, I did
Don't
not.
call me boy.
Oh, sorry, young man.
Thank you, young man. I'm wearing a tie.
He is, by the way. He's wearing a tie. Everybody who comes into the studio, Troy LaRaviere has entered the studio, says the same thing. Hey, what's with the tie today?
Yeah, I know.
That's what Rachel Ventura said the same thing. Maya said the same.
Usually you look like a bald slob. What's going on? All right.
Looking very good.
Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Tuesday, January 21st. Got it right this time, Brianna. It's just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions again for jumping on board and sponsoring our program. Unions like... Wait a minute. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9. They sponsor the show, as well as the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith, Local 126. And District 8. A giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Troy, you looking for something?
Headphones.
Headphones? Oh, I'll take care of that.
Okay.
The Ben Joravsky Show, hour number 2, starts right now. Tuesday, January 21st, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, one man, and one man only. It's the long-awaited return of President of the Chicago Principals Association, Mr. Troy LaRaviere. And now your host, one man, and believe me when I say one man only, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Troy LaRaviere is in the studio. They got a ton of questions. I just wrote them down. Then I'm going to ask Troy, including, I'm going to start off with the Martin Luther King Day question.
Just wrote them down, huh?
Yeah, just wrote them down. Well,
now.
They were in my head. And I just wrote them down. I was just watching Joe Rogan interview Bill Maher the other day.
People.
And by the way, that was not one of the best. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, he was very negative.
Yeah, it was just not Rogan in a show at its best. But anyway, Maher was really impressed that Joe Rogan didn't write down any questions. It's a 2-hour interview, Troy. It's twice as long as we're going to do today. And Joe Rogan, who's one of the most popular podcasters in America, did not have one question written down. He just let it go. So I'm of the Rogan school. But I do this mostly so I won't forget. And then, things I want to pick Troy's brain about. And then, of course, one thing leads to another, and I get through half the list. Anyway, before we bring Troy on, you got an update for us?
Absolutely, I do. And boy, our host is one hell of a political nerd. And I'll prove it right now. The Ben Joravsky is a political nerd.
Well,
when I hear these 2 words, I just go, I don't know. Slush fund.
Oh, is this a story about TIFs?
Oh, yes, sir. 4 years ago, the city council. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Woman Spielman. 4 years ago, the city council signed off on Rahm Emanuel's plan to generate a pot of money to rebuild struggling neighborhoods.
Neighborhood Opportunity Fund.
At the expense of downtown developers. Despite concerns it would create a mayoral, quote, slush fund. Ben, calm down. Akin to a tax increment financing, Alderman agreed to let developers in a broader downtown area build bigger and taller projects so as long as they agree to share the wealth with long-ignored South and West Side neighborhoods. Now Mayor Lightfoot is making Emanuel's Robin Hood program her own, with reforms tailor-made to fuel her $250 million plan to bring, quote, transformative change to 10 South and West Side neighborhoods.
All right. This actually happens to be the subject of a column I just wrote yesterday, which will run tomorrow. The Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. My beloved city of Chicago. How do I explain this, Troy? The idea for writing a column on this subject came when I heard Lori Lightfoot last week talking at the city council in remarks I, for the most part, really agreed with. She was criticizing aldermen for their silliness in some of the things they were saying and their nastiness and what they were saying regarding set-asides for businesses owned by gays, lesbians, etc. And in the middle of that, she says, we can slice the pie here in Chicago for everyone. And when that metaphor of pie slicing is something I always talk about, how we divvy the pie.
Right.
And I have dedicated so many years of writing stories about how unfairly we divvy the pie. So the notion that Chicago could suddenly, overnight, fairly divvy a pie or slice the pie is preposterous. And case point, number one on the list is the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which is where they slap a fee on a developer who gets a zoning approval. If you had been elected mayor, you would be dealing with this. And then that money gets channeled into a fund which is used to finance entrepreneurs on the south and west sides. Mayor Rahm worked himself out with exhaustion, patting himself on the back every time he had a press conference once a year or so where they would dole out these awards, okay? And in reality, so while they're doling out these awards, meanwhile, they're funneling $1.3 billion to Lincoln Yards. So again, Neighborhood Opportunity Fund is predicated on the notion that Chicagoans are not very bright, and they'll be really impressed and wowed by a press conference in which you pat yourself on the back for giving like $47 million over the course of several years to the South and West Side, while you're giving $1.3 billion. Like, Chicagoans don't know the difference between $1.3 billion and $47 million. That is what the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund is dedicated to.
The other thing you have to think about is sort of the scope of where that 47 million goes and the scope of where that 1 billion or 1.7 billion goes. It was actually, this program was actually a talking point of mine when I was campaigning, because at the time when I was still in, 11 million had been spent that year in the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. 11 million for the entire South and West Side. That's $11 million. That's the point you have to emphasize. For the entire South and West Side, $11 million. And I can go over here to Wintrust Arena and see an amount invested in that one arena that quadruples that $11 million in terms of the public money that was put in it.
Yes, public money, correct.
In terms of the public money that was put in it. You put 4 to 5 times more public money into one project on one block than you did the entire South and West Sides of Chicago. That's how I help people to see just how inadequate the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund is in relationship to other funds that pad the pockets of developers, and 2, the need on the South and West Sides.
Yeah, no, and it's, again, get your thoughts on this. It's really a very cynical thing. The notion that you can hold a press conference to pat yourself on the back for doling out $47 million to the entire West and South Sides, while ignoring the fact that you got $1.3 billion going to this little corner of the North Side. And we're not, you're right. The Wintrust, the DePaul Basketball Arena, the Marriott Hotel, the TIF money that went to Navy Pier, all of it dwarfs the $47 million. So the notion that you could pat yourself on the back by doing something that just sort of proves the point that the pie is not being sliced up fairly, while pretending as though you are slicing up the pie fairly, suggests that you really think the public is stupid, because they can't tell the difference between 47 million and 1.3 billion.
And that you have no real commitment to addressing the actual need, because $47 million is not going to do on the South and West Sides what is needed on the South and West Sides. You have to have someone in there with a vision of investing billions of dollars in those neighborhoods, and that's not what we have. It's not what we had before, and it's not what we have now.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out. I did end this column with a little hope. Maurice Cox, who was on Franz Billen's show last week, he's a new planning commissioner, and when asked about funneling out an untold tens of millions of dollars for some in TIF monies for projects that would build a barrier over a top on the expressway so you can put a high-rise, said that money would be better spent on in black communities in the Southwest. So I've never heard a planning commissioner talk that way, Troy, so I'm trying to be hopeful. I was very impressed that he said that. I know that just goes to show you how low the bar is in the city of Chicago. But I was impressed because I've never heard a planning commissioner talk that way.
City, right.
Yeah, in this city, they usually can't wait to give the money.
Is that the one that came from Detroit?
That is correct. He's from Detroit. All right. You got any more updates, D?
February 4th, first Tuesday, 1354, West Wabansia. Carlos Ramirez Rosa versus Brandon Johnson. The debate of the century.
Ooh, yeah, Elizabeth Warren versus Bernie Sanders. We'll get Troy's thoughts on all that in a little while. But I'm going to start Martin Luther King Day yesterday. That's the one day a year where everybody gets together, holds hands, and say how much they love each other. And then as soon as the day's over, they go back to fighting each other. Talk about cynical acts. Today's article, I had to share this with you, Troy. Pro-gun rally of thousands in Virginia ends peacefully. I don't know if you saw this. This is the part that I was reading the story about. Tens of thousands of gun right activists from around the country rallied peacefully on Martin Luther King Day. So gun rights, let's just think about that for a moment.
Okay.
Martin Luther King, of course, for our younger listeners, was killed in 1968, assassinated, shot by a sniper. So there's a gun rights rally on Martin Luther King Day, and they're shouting USA, and they're heavily armed. There was one gentleman who was particularly popular. He was a truck driver from Richmond who was carrying an AR-15 rifle just outside of Capitol Square. He said, "I love this. This is like the Super Bowl for the Second Amendment." And I'm reading from this article from the Associated Press, he was one of the few African-American rally goers in the crowd that was overwhelmingly white and male and was frequently stopped and asked to pose for pictures because he's wearing his, quote, Black Guns Matter sweatshirts. Wow. Any thoughts on that one, that little riff? Black Guns Matter sweatshirt, very popular with the crowd. Everybody wants to take their picture with them.
I got nothing, man. I'm speechless. You've accomplished it. No one has ever made me speechless before. You have made me. I'm speechless, man.
I was surprised. What would the reaction been if he'd been wearing a Black Lives Matter? I raised this.
I mean, it's interesting that the NRA itself is pretty quiet when the gun rights of black citizens are violated. Like Philando Castile, he was legally carrying his gun and was killed as a result of it. And the NRA didn't say a thing. Gun rights activists didn't say a thing. Not one peep out of any of them when it was a black person being killed by having his gun rights, his rights to carry an arms violated. So that's an interesting thing to juxtapose against those same people who were silent on Philando Castile coming to ask this black man to pose with him, and I think it was more for his shirt than it was for his gun rights. I think it was. I think people probably posed with that man more because of what his shirt implied about black lives than what it said about black people's rights to carry guns. If I'm making any sense, I think if he had a shirt that said that explicitly said something about sort of like black people have gun rights too, right? Like something like that. No one would have asked for that. It was because it said Black Guns Matter as opposed to Black Lives. That's why people want. They didn't give a damn about his right to carry an arm. They liked the fact that it seemed to be a message against Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. He was trivializing and mocking the rallying cry that has you've been hearing for the last 5 years, ever since Ferguson. Black Lives Matter. So he's mocking that by wearing a shirt that says Black Guns Matter.
I don't know if he was mocking it intentionally. It certainly does mock it. I know the people who embraced it and wanted to pose with it were certainly mocking it. As far as he's concerned, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But I'm fairly certain that the people who stopped to ask for a photograph were mocking Black Lives Matter.
Also, at this pro-gun rally, they had a poster of the face of Virginia's Governor Northam opposed on the head of Adolf Hitler. So, happy Martin Luther King Day in Virginia. All right. Let's go on to Bernie and Elizabeth. You sent me an article that I only had a chance to read the opening couple paragraphs, but talk about it. Bernie and Elizabeth, we were talking a lot about this all day. Talk about what the gist of the article is and the argument they made.
Well, it's from Jacobin magazine. And they analyze how both Bernie and Elizabeth Warren do with Trump voters in their own states. Because in the final analysis, we must beat Trump, right? We must beat him. We cannot hope and rely on the hope that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to be healthy enough to serve another 4 years on the Supreme Court, let alone live another 4 years. Trump has been packing the federal courts, and we just cannot let him have another 4 years continuing to put unqualified ultra-conservatives on our courts, and certainly not giving them an opportunity to put someone else on the Supreme Court. That said, he must be beat. That said, we must pick the candidate who has the best chance of beating him. That said, that candidate must do one thing. Now, there's several things, but the most important thing that candidate must do is take those Obama voters who went Trump and bring them back into the Democratic fold. Who can take those and also take some of those Trump voters and bring them over? Some of them. But mostly those Obama voters that went Trump, you have to bring them back. You win. And so they analyzed how Elizabeth Warren did in the 2018 midterms when she ran for her Senate seat again, and how Bernie did in the 2018 midterms when he ran for his seat again, with those Trump voters in their own state. Bernie was something like plus 14 with those voters. Elizabeth Warren was something like negative, I think it was -7. So she can't even flip the Trump voters in her own state. How is she supposed to do it in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Florida? She can't even do it in her own home state of Massachusetts. And we want to consider putting this up against Trump. Absolutely not. Like, nothing against Warren. You have shown that in your own state, though, that you are not the best qualified person strategically to return the White House to the Democratic Party. Who is? Who has the best record with Trump voters in their own state? It's Bernie. He is the one who has converted more. Every year, every time he's in an election, he consistently outperforms Democrats. Whoever the Democrat running is, if the Democrat gets 55% of the vote, Bernie gets 65. That means that 10% voted for the Republican for the presidency, but voted for Bernie as their senator. He has consistently shown an ability to bring the conservatives over and vote for him. And Warren has not done it in Massachusetts.
Now, what do you think it is about Bernie Sanders that does that?
It's his plain spokenness. It's his sort of populist appeal. I mean, there are people who don't necessarily, they're not socialists. They're not liberals. They're just like a guy who seems like they're on their side. Trump was able to fake that, right? Bernie does a much better job giving that because it's real and you can feel that it's real. This is not all voters, but with that segment that you need to flip, right? I think they're highly influenced by sort of the personality, the persona, the demeanor, the messaging, whether or not this seems like a guy who's on my side who's going to fight for me, or a person who's on my side. And a lot of times it's a guy because we live in a sexist world, which we can get back to that Bernie Warren thing later on. And Bernie seems to convey. And when he talks, you know political speak, and you know someone who is talking outside of the mainstream. Trump talks outside of the mainstream. Bernie talks outside of the mainstream political talking. They both do that. And so in the 2016 election, you had Hillary, whose conversations was well within the political mainstream. Trump's conversation was way outside of it. And so he seemed like something different. Bernie also has a conversation, talking points that are way outside of the political mainstream, that talk about the fact that this is a rigged economy, that the people who rigged that economy then rigged the political system with the money they get from the rigged economy. You know, that excites people. It gives people the sense that, yeah, this guy's different. And so they both do that. And I think given the choice of those two, that people are going to side with Bernie. There's certainly those Trump voters, those Obama voters who went Trump. Elizabeth Warren's conversation is not going to bring them back.
All right, now let's talk about Bernie's appeal to black voters. This is something that I've talked. I don't know if I've ever talked about with you on the show. I talk about it a lot on the show. Joe Biden is doing much better than Bernie among black voters in polls. I'm not sure I completely believe the polls because I have my own issues about the inability of pollsters to adequately decipher what black voters were up to. But let's just stick with the polls. He's doing much better, Biden is, than Bernie. This is 4 years later after Bernie's already run. Bernie seems to have an inability to really win over black voters at a large number, even if the issues he's addressing would be those that would benefit many black voters. So this is something that I scratch my head about all the time. What's your thoughts on this?
I have several. Number one, I remember when Obama was running, and Clinton, while Obama was in the race, had an edge in those early states in the black vote. And it wasn't until people got to hear Obama, when he started getting a lot of press coverage, that began to flip. With Bernie, when black voters hear him, they tend to agree with him and side with him. The press seems to have been, they seem to be intentionally ignoring Bernie, not giving him a lot of time. Because we have to remember that the average voter does not pay attention like you and I do. And so whomever the press feeds to the average voter, that's who the average voter hears and gets a chance to understand. I don't think the average black voter has gotten a chance to really hear Bernie, because those that I know of and that I've seen who hear him like what he has to say. I think we give Bernie the Democratic nomination. You can't ignore him at that point. Bernie gets the nomination. He cannot be ignored.
Yeah.
He has to. There's no one else to cover. You cover him and you cover Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that his message will certainly resonate with not just black voters, but voters of all kinds.
Well, I'm just laughing because that line is so true. You won't be able to ignore him. Now they will try to trivialize him, and they'll try to marginalize him. They'll try to distort his message, because things that Bernie are calling for are things that a lot of powerful people in this country are against: redistribution, raising taxes on the wealthy so we can have health care for all.
The Republicans might. See, what we have to remember now is that right now the Democrats are trying to marginalize him also.
Yes, that is correct.
Like the outlets that a typical Democratic voter or black voter might tune into are also trying to ignore him. Mm-hmm. We can always count on the Republicans doing that. But once he gets the nomination, all of the pro-Democratic outlets who are trying to get anybody but Bernie are going to have to cover Bernie, and they can't. Unless they want Trump in, like, they have to get in line. They have to give him fair coverage. Unless they want sort of party suicide and just hand the thing over to the Republicans again. You have to swallow the fact that Bernie is your nominee, and you have to cover him in the best light possible. So if he gets the nomination, all of that is going to change from the more Democratic-leaning outlets.
One of the homework assignments I gave you, I sent you an article about Michael Bloomberg and his stop and frisk policies, and it was in the New York Times. Interesting article. Michael Bloomberg, of course, is the former mayor of the city of New York, a billionaire. The guy is really rich, Troy, and he has pledged to spend $1 billion at least in this next campaign. And he says he'll spend it even if it's he doesn't get the nomination. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie get the nomination, doesn't agree with them. He would still spend it on their behalf. That's real money. As you know, you thought about running for mayor of the city of Chicago, and you had to step back to a large degree because you had no money.
Right.
Money talks, so that's real money. And yet he's having a difficult time. His apology may not sway crucial black voters. Hard line and stop and frisk haunts Bloomberg. I find this fascinating on many levels, this story. Mayor Bloomberg was a big proponent of stop and frisk when he was the mayor of New York City, and they were stopping and frisking a lot of black people. The world has changed dramatically in just 10 years, because that was about 10 years ago. Wasn't it? Yeah, 10 years ago. Well, the math, I'm not that great at math, but it was about 10 years ago that stop and frisk. Everybody, it seemed like, except for a few, malcontents like you or me, and Maya maybe, there weren't a lot of people objecting to stop and frisk, at least elected officials. Now Bloomberg's running around apologizing for it. I think that shows a lot about how this country has moved to the left, at least the Democratic Party has moved to the left. Do you think it's insurmountable for him? Is it enough to apologize?
I think what is insurmountable for Michael Bloomberg is Michael Bloomberg. Like, I don't think he can get over just being him. Like, he just doesn't motivate people. He doesn't make me want to get out and vote. He doesn't change my mind when I hear him talk. He just doesn't excite anyone, unless you're from New York, maybe, and I would imagine half the New Yorkers aren't excited about him. But given that aspect of what's insurmountable, I also think that, I don't know if the stop and frisk piece is insurmountable in terms of the average person's opinion of Michael Bloomberg. I know it's insurmountable for me. Like, if I liked him, if he was an interesting person, if he did have some kind of charisma, that would be my deal breaker. No. But I don't know if the average voter is sort of hardline with on that the way I am or some other folks might be.
Well, I do know that the average voter was supporting it back in. The voters are not perfect. I mean, it was the popular view of police tactics back in the O's. That it was Democrats were supporting it, trying to show that they were tough, and they were getting reelected by Democratic voters.
I remember. I mean, he's subjected, and the reason it's insurmountable for me is, my God, man, as someone who grew up having to suffer through many of the insults and humiliations of being targeted by law enforcement unjustly, and then you create a policy to subject millions of people to that kind of humiliating, targeting activity, day in and day out, every day in a city of what, I don't know, how many millions of people in New York now? It was 10, 12 million? I mean, used to always say 8 when we were kids,
8,
but I would imagine that it's a lot more than that by now.
Well, Chicago fell. We used to go 8 in New York, 3 in Chicago,
Right.
and Chicago's fallen significantly. So,
but subject, whatever the percentage of the black population of that 8 million is, to that kind of daily harassment, targeting, unjust, humiliating treatment. It's like, you don't get it, man. You just don't get it. And I still don't think he gets it, because he's never talked about. He's apologized, but he's never talked about the human impact of that policy, man. You are people over and humiliating them every single day. So no, that's a deal breaker for me. But I don't think the average person looks at it that way, unfortunately.
I have to agree with you on that one, and I think Michael Bloomberg will have a big role before all is said and done. 'Cause like I said, $1 billion is serious change, and so he's got a commercial coming out on the Super Bowl. And then Trump, when he heard that, came back with his commercial, or maybe it was the other way around. I'm looking at Rob Markwick, my next guest. He can't remember either. But I think it was Bloomberg was the one who came out with the commercial first. Yeah, he's our bonus guest after this show. But what the hell? Sit down, Markwick. And State Senator Rob Markwick. I was almost calling him state rep, but I remembered he was promoted of sorts. Anyway. Bloomberg $1 billion is going to kick in the race. What impact, Rob, do you think Bloomberg's going to have on this Democratic race?
It's such a wild card, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty clear that, he draws off moderate centrist Democrats. I assume, you'd assume that he would hurt Biden the most, right? Because he's not going to, I can't imagine Bernie supporters are going to say, oh, Bloomberg, let's go for him. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's where I think. I mean, Biden's, in a strong position, but it could be just enough to pull him out.
Mm-hmm. Well, the positive of it is if he's going to kick in $1 billion in this campaign, that's a lot of ads. It'll be anti-Trump ads. I do not believe Michael Bloomberg, I'm with Troy, in a million years will be the Democratic nominee. I just don't see that happening. And he's so late in the game anyway.
Yeah.
But $1 billion, Troy LaRaviere, is some serious money, and that's just going to be attacking Trump. He seems to have a personal grudge against Donald Trump. I don't blame him for having a personal grudge against Donald Trump.
And Ben, we were talking about it yesterday. We were starting to compare, Pritzker, he's a billionaire, got $1 billion, but Pritzker put the legwork in, right?
Yeah, that was the difference that I was drawing when I was talking to Dennis about this. J.B. Pritzker went around the entire state of Illinois, built his alliances, got people to support him on the local level, and that enabled him to sustain some rocky moments in that campaign. Like, for instance, I don't know if this is ancient history, Troy LaRaviere.
I remember.
You remember when the ads broke, when the Tribune got a hold of tapes where Pritzker and Blagojevich were making fun of various black elected officials, and here was the Democratic, and he had already he already won the support of many black elected officials. They had press conferences for him. We forgive him, this, that, and the other. Right. He had put in his time and built.
In Pritzker's defense, he wasn't making fun. Blagojevich was saying more the negative stuff, and Pritzker was kind of seemed to be going along with
That's
it.
exactly
That's my
correct.
memory.
That's correct. He was like,
and I wasn't a big Pritzker supporter, but right is right.
Wait, time out. Yes, right is right. I sit corrected. He was sort of chortling at Blagojevich's antics. I can't remember, Troy, who did you support in the 2018?
Kennedy.
Chris Kennedy.
Yep.
Whose greatest contribution, of course, was the line that Mayor Rahm's planning policies were forcing black people out of the city of Chicago. Irrefutable line, by the way.
That was it. He just said it. And you remember when I had my campaign, my campaign was a big part of it was that Rahm's message to working people in Chicago is get the hell out. That's his message. You shut down their schools and so they don't have a place to walk the kids to school, get the hell out. You shut down housing opportunities and you restrict vouchers, your message is get the hell out. You ticket them to the point where they can't afford to drive and you tow their cars. Your message is get the hell out. And so to hear Kennedy say it, he didn't say get the hell out, but to just say it like that, I wasn't a big supporter of anybody. I was Kennedy Biss for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was really pretty much that line that made me go, all right, I'm going to just get behind this guy.
I thought you were the reason he had the line.
I actually think, and I'm not sure, I think it might have been Amara. Amara was one of his advisors.
Yeah.
And I know Amara told me that when I asked. I was like, was that you? And she sort of, I don't know if she was telling the truth or not, but she sort of shook her head and was as if it was her that advised him to do that.
2019 Chicago mayoral candidate Amara Inya?
Yes, that Amara Enya.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Very good for knowing that. We have Troy LaRaviere in the studio. Rob Markwick is with us as well. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Troy what's really on his mind. Then we'll break down the show in preparation for our bonus interview with State Senator Rob Markwick. We'll be right back after this. Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
So this idea is a bunch of malarkey.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Troy LaRaviere is still in the studio, and we're going to ask him what's on his mind before we head out the door. Dennis, you have an update for me before we do that?
Absolutely, I do. We're going to go to you, the live stream chat room, before we get out of here. We got Rob Markwick in for our bonus interview today. I'm leaving it up to you guys in the live stream chat. Do we keep open the live stream? Do we keep it going? Do we jump back on YouTube and record our interview with Rob Markwick? It's up to you, live stream chat room. If you've got nothing going on today, we'd love to do it. So weigh in, and by the end of the show, I'll see what you guys say, and we'll base our answer off of that. But let's read your comments today on the YouTube live stream chat. Everybody weighing in. I think all of you people are awesome. Like-minded political people hanging out together on the Ben Joravsky Show YouTube live chat. All right, we got Dragon Slayer 19. I don't know about 18 and the others, but we got Dragon Slayer 19 here, all right? Dragon Slayer 19 says, Warren, talking about Elizabeth Warren, Warren is being mostly annoying for attacking Bernie instead of hitting Biden on bankruptcy, etc., especially since her political career is basically a reaction to how bad Biden's has been.
You know what? Dragon Slayer is a pretty astute follower of politics. Troy or Rob, I don't know if you know this, but what he's saying, or she, I don't know if Dragon Slayer is a man or a woman, but whatever, is absolutely true. Elizabeth Warren's career largely developed from her opposition to the bankruptcy law. I think it was 2005. And Joe Biden was a big supporter of that bankruptcy law in many ways that protected the interest of credit card companies, that law, and left working people vulnerable. And Elizabeth Warren really established her identity, or political identity, from leading the opposition. And Joe Biden, as an incumbent state senator at the time from Delaware, was one of the leading Democratic voices. It was one of those things where Democrats are proving how they can work with Republicans, and that bipartisanship did not really work into the best interest of working people. So Dragon Slayer, very astute analyst there.
Our good friend Kyle weighed in on the YouTube live stream chat and says, this whole handshake thing is gutter politics, like a goon in hockey. It's trash.
Yeah, it really irritated the hell out of me that it became such an issue. But I think I stand by what I said, even without any evidence of it. My sense of it, was that it was something concocted by some strategist in the Elizabeth Warren campaign who thought it would be a good idea to provoke a confrontation with Bernie, to sort of exacerbate what they've detected, the weak support he had among women who are still women voters who are still upset about the fight with Hillary Clinton 2016. It sure smells like a strategist tact. What do you think? You think I'm onto something there, Troy?
Yeah, I think you are. I also think there might even be more nefarious motivations behind that, or just plain stupidity.
Well, stupidity, I do think it was a stupid tactic.
Yeah.
I think it hurt Elizabeth Warren, not shaking his hand. Come on, like, I'm so mad. Like, you're in politics. People say worse things all the time. Hell, read half the stuff they say about me, Troy, on the internet.
It's like, why? One, she did it at a time where he was surging in the polls. And this is not going to stop it. You're basically taking the person who looks like he might be the nominee and trying to give him a handicap, trying to tamp down and stop some of the momentum that he has and is certainly going to need when he goes up against Trump. Like, I hate to say this because I've heard people say it in ways that I think are not genuine, but it seems like all this does is could potentially help Trump. Because it's certainly not going to help Elizabeth Warren. At the end of the day, I don't think it'll help anyone. I think it's BS and it'll blow over. But it's like, why? Why would you risk handicapping the person who's looks as if he's going to be one who's closest to you in terms of political perspective, and then also looks like he'll carry much of your perspective into a head-to-head contest with Trump because no one else is going to carry it. Why would you do that? I don't get it.
And Troy, it looks like someone in our live stream chat is throwing you in the hot seat here. I'm going to ask you the question in just a moment here, but first, we got to award our live chat champion for today. Our live chat champion is none other than our good friend Dragon Slayer 19 with his comment on the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times endorsement. Dragon Slayer 19 says, first time they need to decide, well, this is on the New York Times endorsement more than anything. First time that they need to decide between two women, vastly different candidates. They can't decide? F that.
No,
and he didn't say F.
It was pretty pathetic. Come on, New York Times. Take a stand, all right?
Dragon Slayer 19, congratulations. You are today's live chat champion. You win nothing.
That was good. What about the blue Mustang? No?
No.
We're not giving those away anymore?
All right, Troy, we're throwing you in the hot seat here, buddy. Let's see. It's Brianna, former live chat champion, by the way. Brianna weighed in with her question here. What grade does Troy LaRaviere give Lori Lightfoot so far as mayor?
And Troy is a former Chicago public school teacher and principal, assistant principal. He's got to come up with a grade, right?
So let me just go ahead and play this again.
Jesus, man. I mean, I could do a cop-out and say incomplete.
Well, that means like the New York Times. It's good enough for them.
But I'm not going to do that. So much of that grade is based on my experience with the Chicago Public Schools and what's happening differently and what's not. And we have a board that behaves differently, but that board seems to allow the people who actually run CPS to do the exact same crap they were doing under Ron. And so and also Lori has not lived up to some of the things she told me she was going to do, like get principals involved in decision making. She's she hasn't even come close. She hasn't even started. And so through that experience, my grade is F.
Whoa. Dang, he's tough. I'd hate to have him for a teacher.
I mean, it might be an F plus.
Oh my God, there we go.
But it's an F through that experience. I mean, there's a lot of open government stuff that's happening that looks nice, but when you see what's happening underneath and the people who are running stuff, things are happening the exact same way, but she's putting a really nice, pleasant, soft face to it that encompass many of the sort of things that we want to see as progressives, in terms of open government stuff. But it's like, we're going to have an open government and we're still going to screw you over through this open government. So, yeah, F plus, D minus.
That's total overall grade or just on the issue of
That's on the issue of the issues that I'm closest with, which are the issues in Chicago public schools and education. There may be other areas where she's excelling. but I'm going to grade the one that I know best, and that one is, and particularly the strike, man, the way that went down in terms of teachers having to fight for what she promised she would do. In terms of increasing staffing and just how incredibly understaffed our school district is, and that they had to fight so hard just to try and get something close to adequate staffing. That was disappointing.
Well, Rob Martwick, you're in the hot seat. Should we ask Senator Martwick to give a grade as well, D?
Rob Martwick. What grade?
I've set the bar pretty low.
Yeah, the bar is very, very low. Although F+, I don't know.
So, as you might be aware, the mayor and I had a bit of a personal interaction during the campaign, and I've learned from that she gets an A+ no matter what she does with me. No,
Martwick learned his lesson.
No, it's hard to say. So I will talk from my experience, Troy, which was her ability to accomplish things down in Springfield. And I think that, again, in this shows, and this isn't really a knock on her. I mean, I guess it is because you suffer for it. But the explanation is that she hasn't done this before. Right? She's not done this before. This is new. And so she comes down to Springfield, a complicated place with a lot of 177 super A-type self-absorbed egomaniacs who all think that they're the smartest and most important person in the world. And you've got to get something accomplished there. And big stuff, right? She needed to get this stuff done for the Chicago casino. She needed breathing room on pensions. She needed the ability to change the transfer tax to get more revenue into the city of Chicago. She got none of it. And the feeling is that her staff wasn't engaging. No one was being called, right? No one was being called and said, "Hey, can you give me your vote?" And sometimes that's all it takes is just, "Will you help me?" And even that wasn't happening. So I think I'm not gonna. I've been in trouble once before, so I'm gonna go with Troy's first part, incomplete. But I also want to point out that the things he talked about with the school district shows exactly why we need an elected school board. Right? Because it doesn't matter the intentions going in. The bottom line is this city is an enormous responsibility to run. And CPS by itself is an incredibly enormous opportunity. And when one person thinks they can do all those jobs, they fail at them.
That is just a hint of some of the conversation we'll have with Rob Martwick when we do the bonus, because I'm going to ask him about the elected school board. I'm going to ask him about how life is different in Springfield, or will be different in the state Senate with John Cullerton no longer in charge. All these issues. Will the state Senate be a little more progressive? Or will they go back to their old games of going right to the middle? These are kinds of issues that we'll be talking about with Rob Martwick. But before we do that, Troy, you had some things on your mind that you wanted to get off your out of your mind, out of your chest, so to speak, having to do with the pay rate of principals. The floor is yours.
After the teacher contract, the ink on the contract was dry, like even before it was dry, I got a lot of calls from principals and assistant principals saying, okay, the teachers are getting 15% over 5 years. What are we getting? I can't get my best teachers to become assistant principals because they don't want to take a pay cut. That is the situation we've gotten in the last decade or so, where teacher salary hikes, which we believe they deserve. We're glad they got them because that gives us the ability to recruit good people into teaching positions. But the relative stagnation of the administrative pay scale means that good teachers don't want to take assistant principal jobs anymore because they literally have to take a pay cut. We did a Freedom of Information Act request with CPS 4 months ago. They delayed it. We asked for the hourly rates of assistant principals and principals. How much per hour do they get paid? And along with teachers, so that we can compare, because principals work an entire year and so do assistant principals. They don't get the summer off. They don't get a winter break off. They don't get spring break off. So the best way to determine the relative value that CPS places on their work is to look at their hourly rates. And so we asked for the hourly rates. They asked for a 1 week extension. A week went by, no hourly rates. They asked for a 15-day extension. I said no. They took it anyway. No hourly rates. They asked for another 15-day and another 15-day. We had to send a letter letting them know we were going to sue them before they actually released. They released the hourly rates on December 20th, the date our lawsuit was supposed to be filed. And this is what the data showed, and you can see why they didn't want it out. The average experienced teacher in CPS, now remember, the career trajectory is experienced teacher, assistant principal, principal.
Okay.
That's the career. So you would imagine the salary goes up. These are the numbers. The average experienced teacher, and by experienced teacher, I mean a teacher with a master's degree and 10 or more years of teaching. There are 9,500 teachers in CPS who fit that. Almost half of the teaching force is an experienced teacher. 9,500 of them. The average experienced teacher hourly rate is $70.32 an hour. $70.32. Average experienced teacher. Should that teacher be asked by her principal, you're exhibiting some great leadership qualities on your team, assistant principal position is coming up, I'd like you to think about taking it. That teacher would have to go from $70.32 per hour to a starting assistant principal wage of $49.52 an hour. Over a $20 per hour drop. And then, of course, they would have to work. They'd have to give up their summers, give up their winter breaks, give up their spring break, just so they could work enough hours to get back to the salary they had as a teacher. Now, this is important because one of the greatest impacts, besides the teacher, on student learning and achievement is school leadership. And if we can't get good people to become school leaders, because the road to the principalship is through the assistant principal position. If we can't get our best teachers to take assistant principal positions, then we suffer in terms of the overall quality of school leadership that eventually is available to our young people. And so they go from $70 to $49. And then the starting principal salary is $60. You're still $10 short. When you become a principal, the starting salary is $60 per hour, right? And so you're still short by $10 of the hourly wage you made as a teacher. Now, of course, principals work more hours, and so eventually they're paid. Most principals will make more in a year than their teachers do because they have to work through the summer. But to work through all of that, to have to go through that much just to barely beat out your teachers in salary, that's insane. That is not a compensation system that's going to attract and retain the best people for our teachers. I asked the principal about this, and here's a quote. I showed her the numbers, and I said, in her school, she supervises over 130 people who are on a higher hourly wage than she does. And so do her APs. And so I said, how does this make you feel? She said, it's discouraging, especially when you consider that most administrators work well over 40 hours a week. I average 70 to 80 hours a week. I know my APs work nearly as many. On top of the time demand placed on administrators to supervise extracurricular events as a large school, we also take on the extra workload of hosting evening and summer school regularly without any additional compensation. I also say I feel foolish at times. My APs and I often laugh at the fact that we could literally make more money as bartenders when we consider how much we get paid in relationship to the hours we actually work.
Yeah. All right. I'm with you. So what do you think the CPS should do?
I think CPS and the mayor need to make the public aware of just how important the role of the principal, the assistant principal, and teachers in general and education is, so that the public will want to support investments in the system, investments that will enable CPS to set not just teacher salaries, but administrator salaries at a level that will recruit and retain the best of them so that our children do not lose them. That's what I think they should do.
I'm with you on everything you said except the first thing you said. I wrote it down. I'm going to take issue with you and get your response to this. I think you were talking about a conversation you were having with a principal, and you said, the person said, I want my best teachers to become assistant principals. How can I do that with this? I'm not certain I want my best teachers to become assistant principals. I think I want my best teachers to remain my best teachers. I'm thinking that the qualities that translates into being an outstanding teacher are not necessarily the qualities that translate into being an outstanding assistant principal. So I would like a salary scale that would reward teachers for being teachers and not tell a teacher, well, if you want to make more money, you have to leave the classroom where you're having your direct impact on students. Your response.
So there's two things there. Number one, when you understand the job of an assistant principal and the principal, part of that job is to teach teachers, right? You have to build up the whole teaching capacity of your school, and you're not going to do that if you're promoting mediocre teachers to assistant principal positions. You have to promote the best. You have to promote the brightest, because one of their main responsibilities is to coach other teachers and create an environment in which they can all become just as good as they were. Because quiet as is kept, and contrary to popular belief, teaching is not something you're just born, like a talent you just have. You learn how to do it, and you need the best teachers in assistant principal positions to help people develop those skills. And in relationship to your other comment, that's not an either or thing. One of the things that we fought for quite a while, but we don't get in this system, is some kind of extra lane for teachers so that great teachers don't necessarily have to step out of the classroom, that they can share a lot of that knowledge with by taking a lead teacher position, for example, that gives them extra pay. So share a lot of that knowledge, take positions in which they can share a lot of that knowledge with their colleagues while they remain in the classroom. And maybe, we take one class away from them or two classes away from them so they can have the time that they need to coach other teachers. We would love for something like that to happen. So it's not an either or, it's a both and.
All right, fair enough. Well, let me ask you this question. Rob, you look like you
I'm just listening, and I'm fascinated by it because Troy has such on the ground knowledge of what goes on there. But I find it fascinating as I hear you talk about this inverse situation where technically on an hourly basis you've got a step down in pay. It's the opposite of the charter school model. So the charter school model, your principals and your assistant principals, whoever is administering the school, is getting paid huge dollars, and then they bring in these kids right out of college, and they pay them nothing, and they churn them and burn them and kick them out after a couple of years, or burn them out after a couple of years. And so it's like the complete reverse of that model.
That's a good point. And to that point, that's an excellent point you make there. I would say this, Troy, part of the reason why the public schools teachers have the benefits they do in relation to the charter school teachers is they have a strong union, and they go on strike.
You said that.
And
I'm so glad
he said
Senator
that.
Martwick is here, because one of the things that we want is to extend, because principals in Illinois don't have collective bargaining.
Yes.
Principals in New York have collective bargaining. Principals in California have collective bargaining. And in Maryland, they have collective bargaining in about 20 different states. So to be a state with a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democrat in the governor's office that continues to deny collective bargaining to school administrators seems somewhat odd to me. So as a result, right now there is a bill, language for a bill, on a certain legislator's desk who's not in this room, and we're hoping to get support for it so that school administrators can also use the power of collective bargaining to advocate for themselves and the students and families that they serve. Because that way, when the next time the teachers are on strike, they're not out there alone, that they have this respected voice of school principals who feel more empowered to speak out and not be silent.
And as you say that, I helped walk those picket lines, and I'll tell you what, at almost every school that I walked a picket line on, those principals were out there with their teachers, but there's nothing in it for them.
Well, not only, okay, this is a change. now we're on a tangent. This is a change, and Troy knows where I'm going. When I first met Troy, all right, was in 2014, I want to say, when he wrote that essay for My Beloved Bright One. There was this essay that just told about how Mayor Rahm and the bureaucracy at the Board of Education uses principals as props in their propaganda campaigns, and that this was one principal, Troy LaRaviere, who wasn't going to allow himself to be used as a prop. Immediately called him up. We had coffee, and the rest is history. So I welcome this collective bargaining bill. I'm going to get the information when we're off air. I'm going to write a story about it, bring people on. I welcome it because one of the things that's been traditional in Chicago public schools, and Troy knows I'm speaking the truth here, that principals have been used, the like little props in a public relation game by whatever mayor was running the show to diminish whatever claims the teachers were making, to diminish whatever claims parent activists were making, to diminish whatever claims troublemakers like Markwick were making. Principals were used. So the principal may go on the picket line and tell the teacher, I'm with you, but that's like a private thing. Publicly, those principals, if they say anything, they'll be like chirping whatever the boss says. What do you think about that, Troy LaRaviere?
I completely, that was the situation. And I think that was the situation, but I wouldn't say it was, they had a few principles they would bring out. Pat Basileri was one of them. And when my article got published, 3 principals came out and publicly risked their careers as well to say Troy's right. And they went and dug up Pat Basileri to come out and say, well, I'm not afraid to speak, and I think the district respects my position. They always have a few. And oftentimes those few, since they're the only ones who you typically see in the paper, people sort of get this sense that that's what principals are like, because every time you see a representation of principal voice, it's someone who they've picked who's willing to echo and parrot what they've said. But that's a select group of people who typically stand against the prevailing opinion of 90% of the principals in the district. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, we'll see where this bill goes. I'm delighted by this collective. I'm for collective bargaining for everybody. I'm a big union guy. Unions support this show. So why not the principal? Why not the principals?
It's not a bill yet. It's a draft. It's going to be a while.
Oh, so he's got Markwick's already volunteered to run the bill.
All right.
All right. It all happens on the Ben Joravsky Show. All right, we are going to close down the regular portion of the show, take a break, and then bring back State Senator Rob Markwick for a bonus interview. I want to thank Troy LaRaviere, Maya Dukmasova, and, of course, Rachel Ventura was a surprise guest. She's running in the Democratic primary on the 11th Congressional District against incumbent Congressman Bill Foster. It's a really interesting race out there. Rachel Ventura is sort of the Bernie persuasion. She comes at it from the left, and Bill Foster is more of a mainstream moderate Democrat. So we'll see how that goes down. Rachel Ventura, thanks for coming out. And, of course, could not do this show today or any day without the man, the myth, the legend, the pride of joy in Alton, Illinois, and the State Senator Rob Markwick and Troy LaRaviere can tell you, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Looking very good with a tie on today. Give yourself a raise, take it out of petty cash.
Hey, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Speaking of Benny J bonus interviews, we're going live with our interview with Senator Rob Markwick. Just give us about 20 minutes, and we'll be right back on the YouTube live stream chat. I got to cut today's show up for all the downloaders. You know what I mean? So check us out on YouTube. If not, you can download that interview. I think it'll be up on Sunday. There we go. At Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. It'll also be available on YouTube after we end the interview. We'll see you Wednesday.